exact same amount because they didn't know not to wake you up the next day. Maybe not. The other news is it's time for your annual checkup. I thought it'd be cool if I could have gotten a doctor's jacket and a stethoscope, because once a year, this time of year, in the end of October, 1st of November, I always do at least a 3 or 4 week series where we talk about marriage, because I don't know if you notice, marriages can be in trouble in this culture. Marriage can be a challenge to start with, and then of course we've got this high military content, and military doesn't really introduce new problems to marriage, but it magnifies the ones that are naturally there. And so we do that every year. We're doing it the next 3 weeks. Next week we're actually going to bring up a military couple as part of the sermon to do an interview and discuss some of the special things that go with that and how to combat those. And then, of course, in 2 weeks, we'll be doing the annual sex sermon, because what good's a physical if you don't have the point where you say, turn your head and cough. So we're going there. All right, so today let's go ahead and just jump in. We're gonna end up, by the way, if you want to turn on your Bible. We're going to end up in 1 Peter chapter 3. That's going to be a little bit from now, because we're going to start with a basic question, because most people, one big reason marriages have problems is they start with the wrong understanding of the most important thing. If we were to ask, I've got a good friend of mine, his son's getting married today, and I wonder if I went and talked to the couple at the reception and said, what's the most important thing in your marriage as you start out? And they probably would look at me and go, love, right? Love will keep us together. Love is all we need. Love is the answer, or some other pop song lyric from somewhere along the way, right? They'd all throw that at you. But the problem is with basing a marriage on love is that love is fickle, and love is something that you have to build, and it takes dedication and intensity to create love and maintain love in a marriage. So love is not what you build a marriage on. I hate to break that to you. Some of you didn't know that. You came in today thinking love is what you build your marriage on, and I'm sorry, it's not going to do that, because love is this fickle, changing thing that you have to build and develop. And frankly, at 3 in the morning, love doesn't get you diddly squat. You take something more. And the thing that makes a marriage work is, the key word is commitment. Commitment is the key thing to make a marriage work, and we'll start out with the obvious piece. The first thing that has to happen for a marriage to work is you have to commit to staying together. Because any two people, by nature, will in time drift apart. That's how it works. So you have to commit to staying together. Genesis, God says, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. And then Jesus reemphasized it in Matthew 19 and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, so they are no longer two but one. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. Now, you might think, okay, we're good. We are committed to staying together. That's not enough. I'll never forget this. When we just moved into the tent building. So this would be 7-8 years ago. And we just moved in. Finances in the church were really tight because we're in a brand new building and just getting used to the new mortgage and all that stuff. And one week, my microphone broke. And remember, church is broke. And my microphone is also broke. That same week, Nancy at the time was running our children's ministry. She comes to me in the middle of the week and says, Steve, that system I've been using to check in kids, she was using this paper system. She says, we've outgrown that system. We can't keep the children safe. We can't guarantee their safety with this paper system because I can't keep track of the kids. We need to invest in a computer system to take care of the kids. And I was like, is anybody donating one of those right now? No. And then 2 or 3 other things broke that week. It was like the week of breaking. And there was this couple in the church, and they were, I don't know, little cute couple. You know the little cute couples? They don't look quite old enough to be married, but they've been married a little bit because they look really young, and they're just a little cute couple. And the wife walks up to me that Sunday between services and says, oh, my husband just re-upped, and we got a bonus. We wanted to give back to the church because the church has helped us out a lot, so we wanted to give back to the church. So she gave me an envelope, and if you give me an envelope with money, first I'll say thank you, and then I'll give it to somebody else without opening it. because I don't touch money. I don't know what anybody gives. I just stay away from that. So I go and I hand it to Nancy because Nancy was handling children and handling me at the time. And so I gave it to Nancy, and I went and did the next service and come back. She goes, you know how much money was in that envelope? Not a clue. I didn't open it. When she told me it was enough to buy the new microphone, pay for the computer system for that, and the 2 other things that are broken that week. So this is just this cute couple that we just love, and they're serving in ministry, and we're just watching. And about 4 years later, they want to meet with me, and we go to the coffee shop at Jitterbugs, and they said, for the past few years, our marriage has been in trouble. So we show up in October, November, in the fall. You do that marriage series, and that would give us a renewed energy. That would keep us going. But from the time we finished the series to the next year, every year our marriage just went down that entire 11 months to the next one. And then you'd give us a new jolt of encouragement and energy, and we'd make it, and we can't do it anymore. We're done. And I had to watch as this beautiful young couple got divorced because while they had a commitment to staying together, they didn't have something else. There was something else in the commitment category that was lacking. Now, to help us understand what the lacking part is, let's talk about divorce. Because if you look go back to the Jewish history, how they interpreted things in the early Christian history, this is weird. I'm going to tell you the 3 standards to get a divorce. You came to find out marriage. I'm going to tell you how to get a divorce. There are 3 criteria that were considered by the Jewish rabbis for a long period of time the authentic reasons to get a legitimate divorce. The first was adultery. If one of the members commits adultery, you're allowed to get a divorce. It's legal, and you can get a divorce. The second was if the person abandons their spouse physically, either moves away physically or ceases to support and take care of the spouse so that they're being physically either abandoned or abused. And the third was emotional abandonment or abuse, where the one spouse is no longer emotionally connected, has totally, I'm just not talking about a little distant, I mean totally, completely separated emotionally and is emotionally moved out or is abusing the spouse. Those were the 3 reasons in Jewish culture and early Christian culture you were allowed to get a divorce. Jesus actually spoke about that. There was another group of rabbis that came along about the same time as Jesus, and they came up with a new strategy for divorce, and they called it any cause divorce. We would call it no-fault divorce. And the concept was you could divorce your spouse for any reason, including literally burning breakfast. You could literally divorce your spouse for burning breakfast. And so these one group of rabbis came up to him who were proponents of that, and they asked him, Jesus, do you support divorce for any cause? And what they were asking, which side are you on in this debate? The people who say there's only the 3 valid reasons for divorce, or the ones who say any reason for divorce? And Jesus says, no, not the any cause people. He names adultery as one of the 3, but he's naming all 3 because that was how it worked. Now, I said that not to give you reasons to get a divorce. But if you think about it for just a second, and many of you have been through a divorce, what leads to a divorce? Where does one come from? 3 ways, 3 places. Not necessarily abandonment, but you start to separate and move away from each other physically. You move away from each other emotionally, or one of you commits adultery. And if we're doing a checkup, we would say that, and I would say that if you look at your marriage and you see in your marriage that one of you or both of you are moving away from the other physically, if you're not where you don't like to spend time with each other, where you are looking for ways not to be physically together. Now, I'm not talking about if your job makes you be over here for a while, like Kuwait or something, but if you're intentionally trying to stay away physically, if one of you is doing that, you're in the path toward a divorce. If one or both of you are separating emotionally from each other, I read a really good way that it was talking about how you could tell that was if your partner succeeds, how happy are you? And if your partner's hurting, how much do you hurt with them? If you're in your marriage getting to the point where your partner succeeds and it doesn't make you happy, you're emotionally moving away from your spouse. If your partner is hurting and you emotionally are detached to the point that it doesn't impact you at all, you're emotionally moving away from your spouse and you're heading toward divorce. So you've got these three ways that you can be, even if you think your marriage is doing okay, if you just do a self-diagnostic and say, wait a second, I can see us you can do it in the house. We're physically separating. We're trying to not spend time together. Or emotionally, we're disconnecting. Or, of course, we're moving. One of us is seriously considering adultery, or we're moving in directions that would lead to that. You're heading toward a divorce. You're heading toward the pain. Even if you're committed to staying together, in time, that moving apart will lead to a separation. Now, sometimes it leads to an actual divorce. Sometimes it just leads to an empty marriage. My grandmother on my mother's side, she slept upstairs, he slept downstairs, and she told my mom at one point, I love him and I hate him. And that, so right there, they never got a divorce, but that's not exactly what Jesus was shooting for when he said, you're supposed to be one flesh, supposed to be together. So, those are the three symptoms. What's the cure? If you see in your marriage that moving emotionally away from each other, moving physically away from each other, or in that radical sense, one of you moving toward adultery, what do you do? Well, that's where we get to 1 Peter chapter 3. And let me tell you in advance, Paul, the guy who wrote, Paul didn't write, Peter wrote 1 Peter, silly. Go back and tell the first service that I got that wrong. Peter is writing to the people, and I'm going to tell you this in advance because this is what's going to happen to you when I read it. He is intentionally poking them where they don't want poked. We'll talk about why in a second. He is intentionally going to say things that are confrontational and make you uncomfortable. Okay? So when I read this and you feel uncomfortable, you're getting it. Okay? So let's just read it, and you'll know what I'm talking about very shortly. 1 Peter chapter 3, starting verse 1. In the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husbands. Told you. Then even if some refuse to obey the good news, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. They will be won over by observing your pure and reverent lives. Let me just stop right there, because this doesn't fit into the rest of the sermon. I want to get it in. Some of you are married to a person who's not a follower of Christ. Let me tell you how, if you're married to somebody who is not a follower, here's the best way to move them toward Christ. Nag them constantly. Okay? Just constantly be harassing them about the fact that they're not a Christian. Just rub it in their faces all the time. When you get up on Sunday and they're not going to get up with you, you go to church, make sure you bang pots and pans, make a lot of noise, don't let them sleep. If they're trying to watch football, walk in front of them and stop and talk to them. And say, I'm going to church. Are you going with me? And when they say no, just politely say, you're probably going to hell. That is the absolute worst way. What does he say? He says what you want to do if you have a spouse who's not a follower of Christ, what you want to do is become so Christ-like in yourself and live that in your actions and your attitudes in such a way that your spouse goes, I don't know what got into her, but I want it. Or I don't know what got into him, but I want that. Okay? That's the way you do that. I wanted to get that in for those of you who are going to be struggling a little bit in some parts of this message because you're not married to a believer. So anyway, where was I at? Okay, verse 3. Because you thought the first part was uncomfortable for some of you ladies, listen to this part. Don't be concerned about the outward beauty of fancy hairstyles, expensive jewelry, or beautiful clothes. You should clothe yourselves instead with the beauty that comes from within, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God. This is going to be uncomfortable again. This is how the holy women of old made themselves beautiful. They put their trust in God and accepted the authority of their husbands. For instance, Sarah obeyed her husband Abraham and called him her master. You are her daughters when you do what is right, without fear of what your husbands might do. Verse 7, let's switch the shoes. In the same way, your husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding. Whoa. As you live together, she may be weaker physically than you are, but she is your equal partner in God's gift of new life. Treat her as you should, so your prayers will not be hindered. Now, when I was reading that, I noticed something. It was just a little subtle something, but I happened to notice that when it starts talking in verse 7 about husbands, It says, in the same way, you husbands. Now, anytime you're reading in the Bible and it says in the same way or therefore, what you need to do is go, okay, I need to go backwards and see what they're talking about, because there's something in the previous section that informs this section. And it says in the same way. So I go back to the part about wives, and I go back to verse 1. And verse 1 about the wives says, in the same way, you wives. Same way husbands, same way wives. I got to go back to chapter 2. Okay, so I go back to chapter 2, and chapter 2, the end of that is talking, this whole thing is called a household code, and so it's talking to families, and he's now going to talk in chapter 2, he talks first off to slaves, to people who were indentured to another family. And it says in verse 18, you who are slaves must submit to your masters with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, but even if they are cruel. For God is pleased when, conscious of his will, you patiently endure unjust treatment. Of course, you get no credit for being patient if you're beaten for doing wrong, but if you suffer for good and endure it patiently, God is pleased with you. So he tells slaves, I want you to behave this way. And then, in verse 21, he's going to tell the slaves why they should behave that way. And by definition, what we just read, that's also going to tell husbands why they should behave the way he's going to tell them, and wives why they should behave the way he's going to tell them. In verse 21, for God called you to do good, even if it means suffering, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in his steps. He never sinned. He never ever deceived anyone. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. He personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds you are healed. Once you were like sheep who wandered away, but now you have turned to your shepherd, the guardian of your souls. And what is he saying? I want you to look at Jesus. I want you to look at Jesus' life. And what did Jesus do? Jesus came down from heaven and gave his entire life and being for us. Now, remember, what did Christ get out of coming to earth? What was the benefit that accrued to him because he came to earth? Was it like a vacation? Was it because heaven was getting a little stuffy and he wanted to get out and get some fresh air? No, he left an absolutely perfect situation to benefit other people. In other words, Jesus did what he did totally selflessly. And so he tells slaves, okay, I want you in that relationship to act selflessly because Christ acted selflessly. Wives, as you come into your marriage, I want you to act selflessly because in the same way Jesus acted selflessly. Husbands, in the same way, I want you to act in your marriage selflessly in the same way that Jesus acted selflessly. Does that make sense? So what really he's saying is, as we're talking about our marriage checkup, is most of our marriages need a shot of vitamin B selfless. Think about it just a second. And what we need to do is commit to increased selflessness. There's going to be a lot of fullness in this in a second here. Philippians 2 says, do nothing out of rivalry or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourself. Now, why this is important? Have I mentioned that you guys are screwed up? I don't know if I've brought that up before or not. You guys are screwed up. It's the only flavor humans come in is screwed up. What that means, one of the things that means is your natural tendency in how to do things is frequently completely wrong. In other words, the thing you believe will accomplish what you want will actually have the negative effect, the exact opposite effect. And our natural tendency in almost every situation is to be selfish. If I want my marriage to be better, then what needs to happen is my spouse needs to change to conform to what I need him or her to be so that I can be happy. You've never thought that before, have you? We would have a wonderful marriage if you just weren't so blank. You've never said or thought that, right? Let me tell you something. One of the biggest problems in your marriage is you. Okay? You know, I never have anybody come in my office and say that. Steve, could you talk to us, talk to me? Our marriage is in trouble. Can I talk to you? Here, come on, what's wrong? And then they spend the whole time telling me what's wrong with their spouse. I'm going, that's fascinating. So you're telling me your spouse married the only perfect person in the world? How fortunate they are. They should be kissing your toes all the time for the privilege they have of being your spouse. I've had people come to office who've been married 3-4 times, and every time it's been the other person's fault. And I look at them and go, you know the only thing in common in your 3 marriages? You. Okay? So your tendency is to be selfish and find the things that you think will make you happy. And what Peter is saying is, I want you in your marriage to be selfless. Because selflessness leads to self-fulfillment. You have this idea that selfishness will make you self-fulfilled. The problem is, as we'll see in a little bit, the exact opposite's true. And self-fulfillment leads to marital fulfillment. You want me to show you a good marriage? You show me 2 people who are totally happy in who they are in Jesus Christ. Who they are and in their relationship with Christ. You give me 2 people who are both in that situation, I will show you a happy marriage. You show me 2 people who are selfishly consumed with trying to get their own happiness, and I will show you a miserable marriage. Guaranteed every time. So, what's that look like? If I'm going to live selflessly in my marriage, what's that look like? Well, Peter's going to actually tell us. He's going to give us. See, that's why when we read those passages, they made you cringe. Because he's poking you in your selfishness. So let's read. We'll go back and read verse 3 and 4. We'll start with the women, ladies first, okay? It says, don't be concerned about the outward beauty of fancy hairstyles, expensive clothes, or expensive jewelry or beautiful clothes. You should clothe yourselves instead with the beauty that comes from within, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God. Okay. Want to just lay it down? Ladies, how much time do you spend worrying about how you look? How much of your focus is in your physical appearance? And how's that working out as far as making you feel self-fulfilled? Have you ever had a time when you spent hours, plural, getting ready for something? You picked the exact right outfit that minimized the things you want to minimize and maximized the thing you want to maximize. Okay? And you spent time on your hair. You didn't just just fluff it and run. Man, you spent time on your hair. And your makeup, exquisite. You took the best stuff you had and you got it exactly right, and then you got the right shoes that complemented everything it was supposed to complement, and you got the right jewelry and the right accessories and the right odors, and everything is exactly right. And you have it as good as you believe you can get it. And you come out, and either your husband or somebody where you're going makes one casual comment that bursts the entire bubble. And you are deflated. That's never happened to anybody, has it? Okay? See, what you're doing is you're focusing on something that is impossible, which is perfect physical beauty. Doesn't ever happen. And because you're shooting for the impossible, you never hit it. Because you're trying to accomplish something that cannot be accomplished, you are miserable because you keep failing. Steve, how do you know it's impossible? Because I look at who's getting divorced. See, when regular people like me get divorced, it doesn't make newspapers, it doesn't come out on the internet, it's not on the front page of the publications. But when the beautiful people get divorced, they put it on the magazine covers you see as you're walking out of the store. And have you ever noticed how beautiful they are? How much everything's perfect? That person's absolutely perfect. And the relationship went because it didn't help. It was focused in the totally wrong direction. This has always blown me away because for my age group, the first true super duper model was Christy Brinkley. You guys, some of you guys know who Christy Brinkley is, right? Christy Brinkley got a divorce because her husband had a problem with pornography. Okay? See, you're shooting for something that cannot be attained. You're shooting for something you will never reach, and so you are constantly frustrated, constantly stressed out, constantly beating yourself up. You walk into a store, you walk down the magazine aisle, and there are all these pictures of these people who don't look like you to remind you that you don't look like them and to make you feel bad about yourself, and you're buying into that lie. And you buy into that lie, and it makes you feel less self-fulfilled, less good about yourself. You feel worse and worse and worse about yourself, and you bring that home, that lack of confidence, that feeling that you're just not good enough. Let me tell you something that's attractive. Something that's really attractive. Somebody who is comfortable with themselves. Somebody, a woman who is comfortable in who she is, who doesn't pretend to be something that she's not, who isn't trying to be somebody else, who isn't trying to live up to some standard that no human can ever get. That woman is attractive. And ladies, your husband is drawn to you most when you are least concerned with whether or not you're impressing everybody with how you look. Because what's he actually drawn to? The inner beauty of a quiet spirit that's like God. Now, I'm not saying, guys, turn off the idea. And I'm not saying, don't worry about what you look like at all. I'm not saying don't try to look good for your husband. Okay, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that's not the most important piece of the puzzle, and it has very little to do with who you are. Because you can be relatively beautiful and incredibly shallow, and that fades. One of my professors in college said that a woman who's in her 20s has two numbers. She has an outward beauty number and an inner beauty number, and as she ages, her outward number will start to look like her inner number. And you will watch a woman who has character, who is developing to be like Christ, who has that inner spirit, and you will watch her age, and you will watch her get more beautiful with time, and you can look at that evil and you can watch her beauty turn to something very, very unbeautiful. And if you want a long-term relationship, you want to be getting more beautiful, not less. And you get more beautiful by cultivating the inner and not spending your time trying to be something you cannot be on the outer. Does that make sense? Let me just say this. Your guy finds you attractive. Can I just say that to every one of you women in the room? Your guy finds you attractive. He understands that time is an issue, that having babies changes things, and that gravity always wins. He knows it, he understands it, and if he's got anything resembling character on his own, he's okay with it. He loves you for you. And any guy worth his salt is not looking for a model. He's looking for a woman to grow old with. Okay? And guys, it wouldn't hurt to tell your wife that once in a while. Okay? That's the woman one. Okay? Don't look for selfishness. Look for selflessness that focuses on your inner beauty more than your outer beauty. Now, guys, it's about to get difficult. Because in verse 7, here's what he says to guys. In the same way, you husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. Now, selflessness, selfishness. What do guys want? There are actually, I think, two things that are dominant. A lot of things will fall into these two categories, but there are two things that are dominant, and he addresses both of them. One thing that guys want is honor. Guys want to be honored and respected. Guys are drawn to honor the way mosquitoes are drawn to bug zappers. We'll go anywhere that we are being honored. Matter of fact, when I'm teaching this from the other perspective, I'll tell wives that if you want your husband home, honor him when he gets home because he can't help it. But if he's getting more honor at work, he'll stay at work. Guys will go where the honor is. They spend their days trying to be honored. The other thing guys do is they conquer. Guys are driven to conquer. Now you say, I don't understand. What do you think fixing things is? What do you think it is when you try to, anybody, any guys in there, you ever try to fix things? Anything you don't try to fix? Right? Car's not running. Car, you are not under my authority. I therefore decree that you will honor me and start. And I will pour all of my energy in. That's why a guy wants to fix it himself first before he gets somebody else to do it. That's why your husband makes such big messes. Because he wants the honor that comes from conquering the problem. I said flush. And he'll spend the entire day trying to conquer so that he can get honor. And he'll accumulate that honor and bring that honor home, and he'll buy things that you don't know why he wants them so that he can tell everybody else that he has it, so they will honor him for what he has conquered. That's why guys shop the way they shop. They go in and conquer the store, and they come back out. Okay? We are about conquering to get honor and accumulating that honor. What does he say you're supposed to do, guys? Come home and honor your wife. Take the thing that you value the most, and when you walk in the door, stop seeking it, quit trying to conquer it, quit trying to acquire honor, and take the honor that you have acquired and give it to your spouse. Man, that's backwards. Because I want to come in the house and be honored. I want to acquire honor at the house. But what he says to do is to turn that around completely and come in the house and hand my wife honor. Now, this is where it gets really complicated and difficult. Because how do you honor your wife? I haven't the foggiest idea. Women do not come with instruction manuals. And all of them are stinking unique. So what honors one does not honor the other. What honors this woman, the other woman couldn't care less about. What to do. Oh. What did he say? Treat your wife with understanding. In other words, guys, your job is to understand your wife enough to know what honors her and then do it. And all of them are unique. They don't come from a single mold. You have to figure it out. That's what your job. Now, somebody says, Steve, but you can't understand women. You're not called to understand women. You're called to understand woman. One. I think that's why we're only told to marry one person. Because figuring out one is enough of a hassle. You'll never get two. Okay? So you look at your wife and you study your wife and you understand your wife. Now, I got the easy setting on wives. I really did. Like when my wife has a hard day, there's only like two things she wants. Well, three things. One, she wants me to shut up and listen. Two, she might want to just cuddle for a little bit, cuddle up on my arm, and sit here while she tells me all that went wrong, that I don't try to fix, because that would be conquering. Okay? And third, she wants chocolate. Now, let me make this clear, so if any of you run into my wife, you know what to do if I'm not around to be honoring her at this point. When she's had a really rough day, she needs chocolate, but not just any chocolate. Okay? If you show up with a bunch of fancy chocolate, you're missing the point. She doesn't want Godiva. She doesn't want dark chocolate with raspberries. She wants Hershey and Nestle and M&M. That's the chocolate trinity for her. Okay? So when I'm on the phone with her and she's had a really rough day, I then check one of my other daughters. Is there chocolate in the house? No, the emergency stash is gone even. Okay, well, I'm on it. And I'm going to stop by the store, and I'm going to pass by the little fancy hearts with the things on them, and I'm not going to get those. And I'm going to go over to the candy aisle where they sell candy in bulk, and I'm going to grab a bag of something produced in Pennsylvania. And I will present it to her in honor as a tribute when she arrives. Because that's how my wife wants to be honored. Now, your wife might be honored by a foot rub or a back rub or flowers or compliments, whatever it is, cuddling up, whatever it is that honors your wife. Guys, your job is to figure that out and do it. Come out from where you've been working, spending your entire day conquering and acquiring honor, and come in the house and take all the honor that you've acquired and give it to her in the form that she accepts. I got women going, oh, that would be so cool. See, you're thinking, guys, that it's really complicated. You've got to become this super person. You'll become the super person as you self-sacrifice to help her be fulfilled. You'll get self-fulfilled. You'll become that person, but you do it as you honor her. Does that make sense? I hope so. Now, there's one more quick thing. Because that by itself, there's a challenge here, because we started out talking about how you act naturally, and then I say you're supposed to be acting not naturally, but honestly, supernaturally. Supposed to be living beyond your nature. And to do that, you also need to commit to one more thing, and that's to commit to spiritual development. Okay, it said that you must follow in his steps. It said in chapter 3, verse 7, said, treat her as you should, so your prayers won't be hindered. Philemon chapter 1, there's only one chapter in Philemon. The very beginning of the book says, Paul, prisoner of Christ Jesus, and Timothy, to Philemon and the church that meets in your home. Your church, your home should be a holy place of two people growing closer to Christ. Now, that could mean praying together, reading the Bible together, ministering together. Really simple way to illustrate it. If you're here and she's here and Christ is here, as you both move closer to Christ, you grow closer to each other. Not even all that complicated. You grow spiritually together. You find ways to serve together. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he was talking about me and my wife came up with, he goes, you guys are kind of like partners, aren't you? It just seems like you got a partnership. And I said, yeah, we've always run that way. We are in a partnership in ministry. We're in partnership raising kids. We're in partnership in everything we do. And so we serve together, and we love together, and we raise kids together, and we do these things together because that's what makes it work. We're committed to that. Now, obviously, if I'm saying you need to be growing to be like Christ, you have to have a relationship with Christ before that's going to happen, right? And if you don't have that relationship with Christ, well, today would be a cool day for that. And if you want to talk to somebody about having a relationship with Christ, all we ask you to do is at the end of the service, you grab one of these blue bags. We have blue bags corner of the platform, both corners, and then on the bookshelves in the back. And if you grab a blue bag, somebody's going to come up to you who's been trained. They'll take about 10 minutes. They'll walk you through, unpack the bag with you, show you how to have a relationship with Christ. If you have that relationship with Christ and you want to, as a couple, to start growing together, you both have to identify into that. And you identify as Christian, you take the first step by being baptized. One of the coolest things I've ever seen is when we baptize a couple. When a man and a wife get baptized together, that's awesome. I also love it when there's the woman who's been a Christian for a while and the guy's now a Christian and he gets baptized and now they're together as a family that's growing. Those things I just love like crazy. And if the husband's been a Christian and the wife is finally coming to it, or however it works, I just like baptizing people. It means people are coming to be like Christ. I love it. We do that the first Wednesday of every month. Just send us an email or catch us and ask, and we'll get you signed up for that. Now, it may be possible, as I was talking, there's something you think you need to pray about individually or maybe as a couple. We have a cross in that corner of the gym, and that's there 2 reasons. Number 1, so you can tell you're in a church and not just a gymnasium. And number 2, it's a place to pray. And during this next song, if you want to go over there and pray about anything, pray with somebody, pray alone, whatever it is that you feel led to pray about, you can go over and pray. If you want to pray with somebody, we've got some people over there who'd be glad to pray with you, part of our prayer ministry. And if you want to take communion, we've got communion stations, one in the back there and one in the front, to take communion, remind yourself. Maybe take communion as a couple if you can. If not, take communion on your own, however you want to do it. Just this next section is for you to take a step toward Christ and maybe toward each other. And what I want to do to end is I hope when I talked about the 3 things that can lead you away from each other, it can be, the thought of adultery, but even less, but more sinister, is that emotional separation or that physical separation. I hope if that's happening that God's making you aware of it now. And what I want to do to close, as I want to just, marriage is tough. I want to just pray for you guys. Can I pray for you guys? Let's pray. Father, thank you that you created marriage. Father, I thank you that it's a challenge so that we can appreciate it. And Father, right now I want to pray for the couples in the room. First, I want to pray for the ones that are separated, not by choice, but jobs, government, whatever, has moved into another place for temporarily. There are a lot of people in this room who are sitting alone, not by choice, but because of the job that their spouse has. And I pray for them that you'd even strengthen the marriages during this time. And Father, for the ones who can sense, the marriages where they can sense that they're growing apart, I pray they would be committing to that selflessness that can draw them closer to each other and closer to you. Father, for the spouses in the room who they're followers, but their spouse is not, I pray for that spouse that you bring them to you. Father, for the single people in the room, Father, there's so much of this that still applies. Being selfless is the path to self-fulfillment. And I pray that you would just minister in their lives, help them to see the principles that apply to them, give them a peace and just to understand how valuable it is to have a relationship with you, and they lean into that. Father, if there's anybody here today and they're emotionally moving toward adultery, Father, I pray you would point out to them the poison that is. How adultery hurts everybody involved. And they'd recoil from the pain and come back to you in the relationship that you've placed them in. Father, I pray for all of us. Help us to be the spouses we should be, to be the single people we should be, to be the friends of those who are struggling that we should be. And Father, I pray that all of us would be as committed as we should be to everything you call us to be committed to. And that we pray that in every one of our relationships we would glorify you and you'd be honored. In Jesus' name I pray.